Alright guys, so real quick, it's so windy outside I can't really do any filming out there right now. The wind noise is just ridiculous. So just a real quick note here, anytime you can, I really like to use a template instead of just measuring for holes and things like that. So the benefit of the template is you can actually lay it into place and you can see where everything lies, where everything falls. Get it lined up just the way you like it, and then you can just transfer that to the workpiece that you're going to use for your final product. So what I did here is I just took a little piece of cardboard. It's 2 inches wide by 3 inches long. That's going to be the size of the 5/8 stock that I use to make my spacer on this frame. And I just masking taped it into place in the location there where I thought the block would go. And then I just took the bolt that would be for the spring shackle. Took my little paint marker here and I just put paint on the end of the bolt, reached it through the holes on one side, which would be the frame horn piece, the gusset that I'm adding on the inside, because that hole I know is where it needs to be. The ones in the frame somebody else has drilled and they're not in the correct location. So I reached it through there. You know, you can kind of view in from the end of the frame to make sure that the bolt was square and you know, level in the directions that it needed to be. And I just touched it to the tape here and I've got this mark. Now obviously this is off center. When I put the holes in my piece of steel, I'll want to center it up. So all I'll do for this is I'll get approximately in the center here. And again, this doesn't have to be super precise. If it did, I'd make a second template out of some light gauge steel. I'll just measure like this. Then I'll bring it over and I'll scribe a line. And then we'll center it up. Measure this way. So I'll just measure this distance. This is not a real digital caliper, but it's good enough for what I'm doing here. So we're at, yeah, I just moved it. It's hard to do one-handed. About like that. So what do we got there? We are at 1 inch and, can you read that? Inch and what, 3/8. So 1 3/8 inches up from that bottom edge is where I want to be. So that'll put me over in here someplace. And this piece is 2 inches wide, so I want to come in 1 inch from one edge. Somewhere around here. Yep, that puts me sort of right in the middle. So that will be the middle of my hole, right there. So now I've got a template that shows me where the hole needs to be. I can lay this right over top of the piece of steel when I get it here. I can center punch it. I can drill my pilot hole, put my 5/8 hole in there, and then that piece will be ready to go on the truck. So again, this one is not super critical. It doesn't need to be perfect. This this block can be adjusted slightly up and down and back and forth to put it where I need it to be before I weld it into place. But I want to make sure that it's in the right location, that I've got sufficient meat on this plate, and that I've got room to put my welds in on both ends of this piece. So that's kind of how I like to template things. I've had a lot better luck with that than to try and measure and you know, duplicate measurements on strange locations like this. So just a little tip. Once I get my steel here, should be ready to drill my holes. All right, YouTube friends. Well, I've got my little piece of flat bar here. This is a piece of 5/8 by 2 by 6 inches long that I ordered from McMaster Car. I think it cost me what, about $10, $12 for this little piece. So just a quick overview here again. This is my little cardboard template that we made. This guy will go on here. That little peck mark there in the center is where we'll locate our hole. So I'm going to cut this in half. And we'll take it over to the drill press. We'll drill a pilot hole, and then we'll hog that thing out to get a through hole for our fasteners. I also ordered these grade 8 bolts. For those of you that don't know, these markings on the head If you've got 5 little markings like that, that indicates that it is a grade 8 bolt, and that is it's a harder steel, so it's a higher strength fastener. You want to use that on parts and pieces like suspension where they're going to take some abuse. And you don't want these coming apart, so don't use your run-of-the-mill, what is it, AVE calls them, cheese grade fasteners. You want to get something that's a good hard grade 8 or higher. So first order of business is get this guy cut in half. We'll go ahead and mark it out here so we know where the halfway point is. Put this on my little bandsaw, cut it in half, and then we'll drill some holes. So what do you say we get to work? Got my 2 pieces here. They're not exactly the same size, but again, this is not something that requires a high degree of precision. If it did, I would take a lot more time measuring and marking and laying things out. I've got my holes center punched here. I try to make allowances for the fact that I don't know where everybody who's watching these videos comes from and what your level of expertise might be. The reason that you put a center punch when you're drilling a piece of steel like this is that it keeps the drill bit from skating around. You know, you start in here and it's going to want to kick one way or the other, and it may not actually start right where you want it to. So by creating that little divot with a center punch, which is just a punch with a sharp point on it, that gives the drill bit a place to kind of seat, and it'll stay right there where you put it. Now, this is a pretty good sized drill bit. This one's 21/32, so that's a good sized hole. That's a little over 5/8 of an inch in diameter to accommodate these fasteners. Obviously, to push this through that in one shot would take some doing. Now, I've got a drill press here. Again, it's nothing expensive. It's a Chinese drill press. You know, I've been using this one for many years. I picked it up for free. It was broken, and I fixed it. So it hasn't cost me anything, doesn't owe me anything. I could probably push that through there and really hog that stuff out in one shot, but it goes a lot easier if you drill a pilot hole. And the reason for that is, if you look at the tip of this drill bit, you'll see that there's a spot here that's kind of shaped like a chisel. Does that make sense? These pieces out here are actually what does the cutting. But that section in the center, if there's no hole there for it, it actually has to push the metal out of the way as you're drilling the hole. There's nothing there to cut it. And it's really hard for that drill bit to do. So it's a lot easier if we give this thing kind of a guide hole that is at least the diameter of that flat cross section. You see what I mean? This is a cutting edge, and this is a cutting edge, but they don't go all the way to the center. So if we start with a pilot hole, this will go a lot simpler for us. Speed is not necessarily your friend when you're drilling holes, especially holes this size, because speed creates heat, and heat will soften the metal that your drill bit is made of. So you want to keep the speed kind of low. You want to put basically just enough pressure to start making a nice shaving and not push it any harder than that. I'm going to use some cutting fluid. I've got some Tap Magic here, which I think smells good enough that you could probably use it as aftershave. So I like to use Tap Magic. I'm going to use that we'll get these pilot holes punched in here, then I'll switch to the bigger bit, lower the table of the drill press here a little bit, and we'll go ahead and get these holes hogged out. All right, well, we got our holes. I think that'll work. It's not too terribly tight, but again, this doesn't need to be a precision fit. The majority of the strength in this comes from the clamping force that's applied by this fastener. It clamps the bushing that goes, the steel bushing that goes down the center of the pivot bushing there, clamps it between, I guess it'll be this plate and the frame horn that we're adding on the inside of the frame. So that's kind of what captures it in there. It's not actually the bolt completely that retains it. So got that taken care of. We made some springs in the progress. I don't know if you can see from the time lapse there. The one block did take a ride while I was drilling it with my pilot bit. That was kind of something I was watching for. I wasn't hanging on real tight. I do not wear gloves when I am at the drill press for that reason. It's just too big a chance that gloves going to get wrapped up in something and somebody's going to get hurt. So I got a little bit smarter there and used a pair of channel locks. I need to invest in a nice vise to put on my drill press, but there's a lot of things I need to invest in. So one word on this. This is not my drill bit. This belongs to a good friend of mine who was kind enough to let me borrow his tools. That's when you know you've got a real friend. They'll let you borrow your tools. He's a machinist, and he still let me borrow his tools. So you know who you are if you see this video. Thank you sincerely. You helped me out, saved me, I think, $23 is what McMaster Carr wanted for that drill bit. So probably should have just bought it, but thank you anyway. So with that, I think we'll take these pieces out. We'll go ahead and finish mocking things up on the truck, and we'll get ready to weld everything into place. Alright, well, one more little modification. I had to lop the corner off of this block because it interferes with kind of the back side of the curvature here of this frame horn reinforcement, or whatever you want to call it. So I just had to adjust that a little bit. Now it lays up there just right. Shouldn't give me an issue. I clamped it into place on the frame here, marked it with a Sharpie, and then cleaned it up with a grinder. As much as you can, you really want to get down to clean metal before you do any welding. It'll really improve the quality and the strength of your welds. That hole that they put into the frame there is about half a hole off. It's that far off. It's probably 5/16 out of alignment with where it needs to be. So, once again, wow. But it gives us an opportunity to correct that as well. So I think I'm to the point here now. I'm going to go ahead and reassemble things here one more time, make sure I've got that lined up the way I like it, clamp it into place here, and then we'll get ready to make some fire. We'll do some sewing with fire. How's that? We'll weld it into place. welded in there. Let me show you here. That's how far off that hole is. So what I've done here is I've got the rest of the frame horn just kind of roughed into place here. I've got a couple of bolts just sticking through the back there to hold the back end. I've got it clamped up here with one of my vice grip clamps, and I'm going to go ahead and reach through this side with my drill bit, using both pieces to help align me to the work, and then we'll go ahead and finish drilling through the rest of that outside frame rail. I'm kind of on the fence here. I don't know whether I ought to try and weld part of that hole shut or whether I'm asking for trouble if I do that. Sometimes weld can be really, really hard to drill because it's essentially heat tempered. So I'm not sure that I really want to get into trying to enlarge that hole there with weld in the way. I may just use some flat washers or something out there. I haven't decided yet. So we'll see how this goes. Try to get this drilled out and go from there. I was feeling a little gutsy, so I went ahead and did it. I did some repair to that hole. That'll just do a little better job of supporting the end of that bolt. So did that, welded up those 3 holes where we'd had holes in the frame before. Doesn't make a huge difference out there. That's beyond where the spring is kind of supporting things, but just feel better not having any extra holes in there. So that's one side down. I'm going to move over to the other side and we'll repeat the process. Alright, well, here's the other side. There's a couple little shallow spots there. I think I'll touch up with the welder, but you get the idea. Get that other block welded in. You can actually see the bolt is through there now. So that should work just dandy. So I think I'm going to fiddle with that side just a little bit more. We'll try to clean up a couple of those places that were a little shallow and polish that up a little with the grinder. And then I think we're ready to weld these frame horns in. One step closer. guys, admittedly this is not a welding channel and my name is not Jody. I'm not a professional with this by any means. I'm barely good enough to qualify as a hobby welder, but there we go. Pretty sure it's gonna hold. This side I fooled around with a little bit more than the other side. Tried to stack a few passes up just to try and fill that in a little better, and the more I messed with it, the less pleased I was with the end result. So I'm just gonna quit. This side laid in a lot nicer. I'm not sure why, but it made the difference, but it just looks a little nicer. The underside, I'm not even going to show you. Overhead welding is not my specialty. I can barely weld in a flat plane. In here, got this guy burned in as well. Again, these welds are not pretty, but I'm sure they're going to hold. This is not a SEMA build. So, it's just an old work truck. Right, Bill? Just an old work truck. Well, that's about it for this time, guys. We've got our foundation squared up here. I think we're in good shape. I think the next thing is going to be to go ahead and get that Dana 60 up here, get it rolled in, and get this girl back on her own six legs. Get this thing back on the wheels. So glad to have that part behind us. Glad to have the frame repaired. I think it's going to be in good shape here. It's plenty strong enough for what we're going to do with it here now. I feel a lot better going forward knowing that that's taken care of and that it's done right. If you're enjoying this build, click the like button and hit that subscribe button as well. This is kind of what I'm working on right now. We're going to keep pecking away at this truck, and we'll see how we turn out here. I'm pretty excited about where I think this is going and what I think it's going to turn out to be. So thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.